The spokesperson of the ANC, Mahlengi, about to start that briefing live there now.
Undertaking to keeping you abreast with the conversations that are taking place at the NEC. One of those that we're dealing with this morning, that, and I'm just framing this particular briefing, related to the economy and also with a sharp focus on the electricity situation. And with that, to lead us in this briefing, we are joined by Comrade Kensani Mamuluku Kubai, who is here, and I need to emphasize that is here not as a minister, is here as a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC and the chairperson of the Economic Transformation Committee, and therefore our key messenger on matters related to the economy, Comrade Kosianzo Ramokhupa, again not here as Minister of Electricity, but here as a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, as well as part of the ETC subcommittee. Without any waste of time, I now hand over to the chair of the ETC to provide an overview, after which she'll immediately hand over to Comrade Skutla to go to some of the specifics. Over to you, Comrade Mamulu.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mahlengi, a spokesperson of the ANC. Good morning, comrades, friends, members of the media. We are updating the nation on the work of ETC. We have been working, as you know, from the conference. We had the Lekgotla in January that looked at matters that are immediate and urgent that we needed to focus on as the subcommittee. Out of that, we developed a program of action and quite a lot of work that we are doing. But mainly today we'll focus on the impact in terms of economic growth by energy security and what we as ANC are looking at in terms of the impact of load shedding in the country and the response thereof. You'd know that at the beginning of the year, the SG would have done a media briefing after the Lekgotla, where he outlined action plans from those and instructed us as deployees in that other capacity, or instructed deployees to go into cabinet or into government and implement those resolutions. What we are doing here, there's a specific focus because the ANC is worried about the impact of load shedding in the country, and we had to come and brief the organization. We started with a subcommittee meeting where we held the meeting and included provinces, ETC chairs, and those comrades who are deployed in Parliament were part of the subcommittee. We moved from there to brief the NWC, and that culminated to the meeting today of the NEC, which we briefed to the NEC yesterday. Part of what is worrying us as the ANC is the impact of load shedding, both in terms of social issues, security, but also most in terms of economic matters. When we look at the impact of load shedding, specifically on security matters, you would hear quite a number of people raising threats in terms of their lives, women who are coming back from work where there are no street lights and therefore becoming more vulnerable because there's load shedding. But again, when you listen to even Minister Cele, when he addresses every time there's issues of security, he would also link that to saying at that point where there was no electricity, this is what has happened in terms of the attack. One such incident is what just happened in the past few days. Again, when you look at issues around social issues, you look at the impact, whether you talk about in terms of services, the impact of load shedding in hospitals. We are aware, for example, that a lot of money is going into generators, into diesel in our hospitals because they've got to keep the lights on. They've got to be able to ensure that they provide the necessary services, but especially your operations that needs to be done where there is a need to have electricity. So those costs that are taking even in our health sector, whether you talk about even in terms of those who are in the built environment, would say the cost of production for even building material is high. You go into education, the impact thereof for learners to be able to do their schoolwork. So the impact of electricity broadly, it does not only impact on the economy. And we look at the impact again on economic growth, you'd see that production in South Africa continues to go down. There's reported issues around the cost of doing business. We were higher, but because of electricity now, if you are running a business, you've got to be able to provide alternative energy. But those who are small businesses, some of them can't afford, and therefore, in the hours there's no electricity, they close. So this has an impact in terms of our ability to be able to create jobs, our ability to be able to see the economic growth to recovering to pre-COVID-19 numbers or even beyond. So that's why the focus here in terms of energy. I must say there are quite a number of things that have been reported in the media that are a bit concerning. I think I must deal with them up front. In the process of our work, both in terms of the subcommittee and engaging with our deployees, I think I saw an article that talks about Comrade Sputla being under attack, and I must deal with it up front. There is no Sputla who's under attack. We, as the subcommittee, have called all our deployees to a meeting, which was held last week, Friday. They presented uniform approach, and also they were part of this presentation that was received by the ANC. So there isn't a point of difference amongst our deployees. We engage robustly, all of us, and give feedback, including myself as the chair in my capacity as chair. So we are working together, all of us, and one of the issues that we've said as the subcommittee is that part of why we are bringing everyone together and we're bringing the organization on board on these issues is to ensure that there's one voice, there's many voices, but one message. And that's the message that we're carrying today in terms of the impact of load shedding and what needs to be done. And all our comrades in government understand what we need to do. So as they take what we have discussed up front, they will be able to take a position of the ANC into the work that they have to do. And I must say that despite us giving instruction to deployees, it does not mean that we are going to compromise governance protocols and good governance practices. So we still respect that, for example, Eskom as an entity has an accounting authority and has executives, and they will have to observe that in terms of doing the work. Also, again, understanding that ministers in cabinet have their own responsibility and activities that we still have to respond. But because we are responsible for mobilization of electoral vote, we are here in government on the basis, or everybody's in government on the basis of ANC winning election and promising voters a particular outcome. And that's why our deployees have to respond to, and because this is the feedback we get from our structures, as even NWC went across the country to do, as we go across the country to do RGCs, the issue of load shedding has been on the top priority. The other issue, again, we are concerned again from the ANC. We see particularly because we've seen a growth of lobby groups. While we respect their right in terms of the constitution, but we think that we've got to at some point be patriotic in terms of South Africa and put South Africa first. We are concerned about, at times, the attacks even on Comrade Sputla by media and journalists. Where we differ, we should differ. But what we are having here, it's an engineering and a technical problem. It's not a political problem at Eskom. And therefore, when issues are being raised, I think it's important that all of us, whether analysts, whether journalists, whether what we have, is to first remember that what we have here is a situation where we've got to rescue the economy, we've got to save lives, we've got to save jobs, and in the manner that we have dealt with COVID-19 in response, where we work together as South Africans, we've got to do that now. And again, my appeal to NGOs that at times when there is supposed to be progress in various areas, whether it's in terms of emergency procurement, we find ourselves in terms of court forgetting that as we do that, we're impacting on ordinary South Africans to be able to have an opportunity to put food on their table. This is the impact we have, and that's why we are calling for South Africans to work with us as the African National Congress to assist us to rebuild the country in terms of the economy, to rebuild our society, but also to ensure that people do not continue where they are. Now, there are quite a number of areas that I'll allow Comrade Sputla to go into the detail in terms of technical reporting into the NEC, but I thought let me just give this overview from ETC that we continue to address the issues around energy security. maintenance of our plants, issues of capacity Eskom, accountability of our deployees, and all the issues that needs to ensure that we get electricity. So the ANC says to its deployees today in this NEC that we've got to stop load shedding, and that's the mandate we get from conference. And today, that's why I'll give to Comrade Skutla to go into detail in terms of the presentation that has been taken into the ANC, the areas of intervention. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Comrade Mamoloko, and good morning. Thanks for extending this opportunity for us to share with you the deliberations in the NEC. As Comrade Mamoloko has indicated, the NEC sees this as an economic emergency that requires extraordinary measures for us to be able to address the challenges of load shedding. And one of the issues that the NEC raised was increased levels of sabotage on the infrastructure. Of course, it's about logistics infrastructure, water infrastructure, but in this instance also about the electricity infrastructure. You saw the manifestations of these acts of sabotage most recently now in Tshwane, when our pylons were under attack, they collapsed, and major parts of Tshwane, Pretoria East, were without electricity for a considerable period of time. And also that undermined the ability of rainwater to replenish the reservoirs. And that's why a lot of areas in Tshwane, Waterkloof, parts of Tshwane East didn't have electricity for a period of time. So the NEC has instructed that the deployees should accelerate our efforts to address the issues of sabotage from an electricity point of view. What we're doing is that we've got, I think it's work stream number 6 that is focusing on acts of sabotage, corruption, and malfeasance in the area of energy generation. And now the NEC has considered and applied its mind, and we have agreed on that there has to be 2 parts to the intervention from a timeline point of view. The first one is the one that is immediate, what we call the winter interventions. Because why is winter receiving a special attention? It's because we know that the demand is going to far outstrip supply. It's going to increase exponentially, and the gap between generation or supply and demand is going to grow, and therefore we need to employ extraordinary measures to close the gap so that we don't put additional pressure on the South African economy. And that's the period that what we call the timelines 0 to 6 months. So 0 means these are the actions that have to be taken up immediately, and then the next timeline is 6 to 18 months. So the point I need to make is that there are interventions that are residing within the first package of timelines that are going to go beyond accelerated effort. So with regards to 0 to 6 months, so what is it that must be done immediately to relieve the stages of load shedding, the intensity that is, so that the economy can continue to, if you like, sustain itself? Of course, you are not going to avoid load shedding, at least in this period, even with these interventions that we are making, but we want to ensure that the levels of load shedding still make it possible for major industries to operate, for families and households to meet, if you like, their daily requirements, like I said, for business also to meet their financial, their commercial objectives, for key installations to continue to operate so that there is no collapse to the South African economy. So essentially we are proposing 4 interventions. So the first one is that we need to run the peaking plants, if you like, the open cycle gas turbines. We know that the total capacity there is about 5,300 megawatts or so. And the key intervention is around the availability of the feedstock, or if you like, the diesel, to make it possible for us to be able to address this matter. So what we know about the diesel situation is that in the 18% tariff increase that NERSA has granted to Eskom, the Eskom is building 8 billion rands to procure diesel. And then we know that in terms of the fiscal relief that the Minister of Finance has provided to Eskom, there's an additional 22 billion rands that the Eskom has made available for the procurement of diesel. So the point we're making there is that we have, as I speak to you, confirmed about 30 billion rands that is available for diesel procurement. And then the second part in relation to OCGT, the open cycle gas turbines, and the issue around diesel was that government should consider to buy directly from suppliers, because what that does is it gives us an opportunity to stretch the 30 billion rands, so that whatever savings you are making from cutting out the middlemen, or if you like, some of these majors that are providing Eskom with diesel, that saving can help us to essentially procure additional diesel, so we're able to stretch the rand. And then the other third area in relation to the OCGT is that we need to address the logistics issues at Ankerleg, because the diesel that is provided at that power station comes by road. It's road-based, whilst other picking plants is piped, and therefore the logistics there is that you can, as I speak to you now, just have 100 trucks a day bringing in that diesel. But it's a technical issue. The point I'm making is that the NEC has had a overall an in-depth technical discussion of what it takes. So that's on the first intervention, is to ensure that we are able to exploit the capacity that exists in our open cycle gas turbines. If you look at the period, I think it's 2013, 2014 to 2017, these OCGTs, the open cycle gas turbines, were on load. On load meaning they were producing electricity at about 21% of the time. And now as I speak to you, they are producing at about 11.5% of the time. So essentially we are calling on the doubling of the exploitation of the OCGT. Then the second intervention, so that's the first intervention. The second intervention is our continued effort to improve the energy availability factor, essentially the efficiency of the power stations. So what Eskom does, it has also what we call planned capability loss factor. Essentially on their own, voluntarily, they take units out to fix them, return them better health, and we are able to exploit as much as possible the installed capacity or the design capacity of those units. So what Eskom has been doing in preparation for winter, they had ramped up the planned capability loss factor, and part of the stage 6 load shedding earlier on in April had to do with the fact that there was, if you like, Eskom was very aggressive in taking out these units so that we get to prepare for winter. So we know now, between the period of May to June, you are only going to have just 3 units that will be out on planned maintenance. So essentially we are engaging all of these units to ensure that they generate electricity for us, and we are confident that we should be able to get the amount of megawatts that are necessary to provide the relief that is required. Because if you look at the Eskom winter outlook, is that they plan that the unplanned capability loss factor, essentially units that are failing not because Eskom voluntarily takes them out, but because they are tripping and there are issues of maintenance. We need to keep that down to about 15,000 megawatts. But we can see that the trend line suggests that it can go up to 18,000 megawatts. So in order to undermine, if you like, the adverse effects of more units failing, I think Eskom will reduce the rate at which they're taking out units. Like I said, 3 units are planned to go out. And then as part of the work that we are doing, working with the private sector, we have identified also priority stations that requires additional technical assistance to work with the general managers there. And what the NEC said is that let's galvanize this expertise to go and support the work that is done at the station level, so that we are able to maintain the station, the efficiency of these power stations at an acceptable level. And then the third area of intervention is around demand side interventions. So demand side, so remember, to resolve this problem, you either ramp up generation And that's why I talk about the open cycle gas turbine. I spoke about the issues around the energy availability factor, that limiting the plant maintenance, and that means that we are ramping up generation. And then the other option is to also ensure that you reduce demand. And our view, in the view of the NEC, is that we must do both, ramp up generation and reduce demand. So on the demand side, we know that in 2010, Eskom ran a very successful campaign. Out of that campaign, they were able to save about 3,000 megawatts, essentially 3 stages of load shedding. So we are going back to that aggressive campaigning. But this time around, we've got the advantage of technology having being advanced. There are load limiters. We can be able to install equipment, telemetrics, to ensure that we are able to remotely disconnect, if you like, these appliances that are consuming a lot of energy, in particular the geysers. So we know that the households consume close to 16% of installed capacity. At peak, they can consume up to 35,000%. And we know that the total number of geysers in the country conservatively is about 8 million. So therein lies the opportunity. So we're going to be very aggressive and ensure that we support the efforts for the installation of these telemetrics, if you like, innovations to help us to address the issues of demand side, in addition to a rolling a public campaign to encourage households. And then the fourth intervention is around protecting what we call key and strategic installations. So I'm talking about hospitals, I'm talking about data centers, you can mention them. So those are, and national key points. So we're going to come to introduce, if you like, emergency solutions to ensure that there's uninterrupted supply of energy in those spaces. We know that part of what is before the courts or in the public discourse is that please isolate these areas, essentially exempt them from load shedding. But from a technical point of view, it's not possible to isolate or exempt some of these strategic installations. And therefore, what NEC says that in addition to the 3 above measures, make sure that you are able to address this area. So, as a result of this intervention, we think that conservatively we can have either add or save. If you like, in total, we'll have about 4,500 megawatts, so it's possible during this period of 0 to 6 months. Remember, this intervention on improving the EAF, they go beyond the 18 months. The period of, we're not going to install 8 million of these gadgets in the next 6 months. So we're going to continue to be aggressive as part of our efforts to ensure that we address the energy security in the country. So that's the first package of intervention. Then the second package of interventions is what is possible 6 to 18 months. So what do we know about the period 6 to 18 months? So first is that the Kusile Unit 1, 2, 3 that had failed as a result of the flue gas desulfurization challenges that led to the structural integrity of the chimney at Kusile. We removed about 2,100 megawatts. So we know that in terms of our timelines, that 3 of these units are going to come on stream. They are going to come on stream late this year. The last of the 3 units is going to come on stream by the 24th of December. The first one will come in November. So we know now that by Christmas Eve, we'll have an additional 2,100 megawatts from Kusile. And then there's an additional unit that was not fired, essentially is going to be commissioned, and this unit will come in February of next year. So that's another 700 megawatts of that will be installed at Kusile. And then the other one, there's a Medupi 4. You know, there was a fire at Medupi in August of 2021. It took out 800 megawatts. In terms of the plan, the schedule was that it's going to come back in May of 2025. Our general managers there in Medupi have done tremendous work, because part of the reason why it takes long is what we call lead items, big items that has got long lead times. So essentially, when you order a generator from the OEMs, because of they are inundated with regards to demand, you have to join the queue, and you find that you are going to get that equipment 2 to 3 years later. So what the team has been doing at Medupi, they've been just, if you like, assessing what is available throughout the world, and we're able to find a generator second-hand in Netherlands. It's about 15 years of age. So you can ask, are you buying a generator that is 15 years of age? Yes, we are doing that, because the design life of this equipment is about 50 to 60 years. So there's still a good 35 to 45 years of life left in there. And as a result of that, we're able to bring back this unit in April of 2024. And then, so that's Kusile, the 2,100 megawatts by December, another 700 megawatts by February, so you have 2,800 megawatts. And then that's Medupi Unit 4, by April 2024, you have got 800 megawatts, so there's 3,600 megawatts there. And then I did say that we'll continue to work on the improvement of the EAF in terms of the Eskom board-approved strategy. By 2024, the energy availability factor should be at 65%. If now you are to factor in the fact that we lost 3 units at Kusile and that the Medupi Unit 4 is not available, if these 3 units at Kusile did not suffer the catastrophic failure, the plan of Eskom board approved, the board approved Eskom strategy of 60% EAF by 2023 would have been achieved. But we are confident we are going to achieve that 65% energy availability factor. And then the fourth area is the issue around the NEC says, look, we are faced with a crisis. So as we speak now, as we are having this press conference, a lot of communities, business are not operating because we are under load shedding. Of course, there's a bit of relief now. We're at stage 3, and it's because of reduced demand and some of the units that have come back. But we know that the winter outlook looks bad. So we're saying in the midst of this crisis, it is important that we continue to sweat the assets that we have. And these are the units that are generating, that are giving us the megawatts, and that there should be a delayed decommissioning of these plants. And as we do that, that should not be undermining our ability for the decarbonization agenda. We are not retreating from the nationally determined contributions. We are not moving away from the net zero path. We are committed to that and the JP program. So that's an important part that must be emphasized, that in the context of those timelines, what we are simply doing is that we need to ensure that the lights are on as we commit, still committing ourselves to that decarbonization agenda, the JP program. And then on the bid windows, we say by May of this year, so essentially next month, we're opening bid window 7. But that bid window 7 must be allocated in areas where there's existing grid capacity. So part of the problems that we had with the previous bid window, the fact that we have not been able to provide the entire allocation, is that in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and Northern Cape, we don't have grid capacity. So now, bid window 7 will, of the 5,000 megawatts, we are going to focus on the Northwest, the Free State, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo, because that's where Northwest and Free State, there's still some room for grid capacity. And in Mpumalanga, there's sufficient grid capacity for us to be able to evacuate these electrons. Again, in May, so although I'm saying these projects, the bid windows are opening in May, but you will not see the electricity in May because there is financial close and then you get to construction. And that's the reason that we are saying that they must be located in areas where there's grid capacity. And that's why we're talking these things are possible to get the electrons and evacuate them. That is for the economy to get the benefit of additional generation will happen in that period of 18 months. So the point we are making is that as we are addressing the immediate crisis, we must be able to have foresight to resolve the issues of energy security going into the future. Again, in May, going to go out for 1,200 megawatts of battery storage. Why is that important? Is that as we roll out PV, for it to best approximate the base load, it must be paired with some storage capacity, so that during the night and the morning peaks, when you don't have the sunlight, you draw that energy from your storage. So we'll do 1,200 of battery and 3,000 megawatts of gas. And then the other thing that we are going to do, the NEC is agreed, we are going to open a mega window, or if you like, a rolling bid window for renewables. So here we're talking 15,000 megawatts and going upwards. Why is that important? It's important to communicate the message that South Africa is convinced and the NEC is convinced that renewable energy is the future. So our commitment to the nationally determined contributions, the issues around the JETP, the issues around the net zero path, we are reconfirming that stance, and that's why we are opening up this bid window. And parallel to that, the NEC said you must ensure that we start with agency to address the issues of grid capacity, its integrity and capacity, so that as and when these electrons come on stream, we are able to evacuate them. Again, 6 to 18 months, what we'll be doing is to ensure that we procure emergency power. So the NEC was deliberate. You say it's emergency, it means that it's a definite time period, and that time period, in the view of the NEC, it can be more than 5 years. Why is that 5 years? It's because the time it takes for us to be able to get this additional capacity of renewables, address some of the issues with regards to grid capacity, we project it could take us that amount of time. And then as I speak to you, Eskom is in negotiations with additional capacity from Mozambique, about 1,000 megawatts, and we think that once the power purchase agreement is signed, we should be able to have it on the grid in the next 6 months. We do have a grid capacity that comes from Mozambique. That should not be a problem. So in total, we are envisaged that as a minimum in the next 6 to 18 months, there's 12,000 megawatts, the additional megawatts that can be generated to ensure that we don't just address the immediate shortage, but we are able to respond to the ability of the South African economy to grow and address its sovereign ambitions of growing the economy, creating jobs and industrializing. And then in conclusion, where NEC says on the back of this aggressive agenda of solar PV, of course, solar PV is also part of what will straddle between the now and going into the next 18 months. So part of that intervention, the fifth intervention on the first one of 0 to 5, is the acceleration of the rollout of solar PV. NEC has directed that government must work out a financing facility that will make it possible for even poor households to access PV solutions, so that these PV solutions are not only a preserve of the rich and those who can afford, those who can raise money through the debt capital market, the commercial banks, but the poor must also have access to that. So on the back of that rollout of PV and the next program of renewable, NEC says we must localize and industrialize so that we are able to create the additional industrial capacity in the country to meet the demand going into the future. And we are confident that there will be investments because they see through of the pipeline and the investors will be able to invest. And then the second one is that we must train as many people as possible to be installers so that in the course of resolving a crisis, we are seizing the opportunities that are sitting in this crisis, and we should be able to create jobs. And as directed, that government must start with immediate effect with regards to the training agenda. So in conclusion, 0 to 6 months, 4,500 megawatts relieve us of that pressure, 5 interventions, and then 6 to 18 months, conservatively 12,500 megawatts. There's a multiplicity of interventions, about 8 of them that are possible. And we think that we should be able to get out of this very, very difficult situation. Thanks, Comrade Mahle.
Thank you very much, Comrade Osienzo, and thank you, Chair. At this point, let's have some engagement. I am looking for any of media colleagues that wants to Go for it. I have my brother there at the back. I've got Goke in the corner, and then I'll come this side. Can we start there and then move in that order?
Thank you very much. Dumelang baik pilih lingkungan bahasa itu jadi itulah kaki nama pandemi transform to English. I was wondering, you say there are no attacks on the election centers transporter, and you insinuate that this is a creation of ourselves as the media. Okay, let me ask the question differently this way. What are the responsibilities of the disputer different to the responsibilities and the role of ministers and is there a guide as to where her responsibilities start and where they stop? And how do you avoid a perception of an encroachment into the two that existed before the creation of the ministry that lives today? Has the NEC particularly been able to discuss that matter and have that blueprint that makes sure that going forward there is no such reports of attacks and differences between the three ministers wherein some of their responsibilities collide? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. When you were greeting, you omitted to tell us which media house and who you are.
Oh, Naki is a
Sanewak. All right. Thank you very much. Okay.
Sipamanda Koke from ANC. Knowing what you know now, is it possible for load shedding to end by the end of the year as per the wishes of the government of the National Congress? By December, will load shedding be over as per what the Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Eden Madina, promised? I'm basing that question on what you have just said and knowing what you know now. Is it still possible to end load shedding by the end of 2023? Taking from what my colleague Mawande has asked, have your roles and responsibilities been clearly defined? IMF has revised South Africa's growth outlook to 0.1%. Simply put, the reason for that is electricity crisis, energy crisis. Clearly, based on what you have presented, it will appear that based on this plan that you have, by the time it's fully implemented, the economy will not be growing more than 1%, which simply put, it will take more than 2 years or 18 months for your plan to keep into action, and by that time the economy will not be growing beyond 1%. The IMF blames the energy crisis. Are you not ashamed of failing for so many years to fix this mess? How do you defend this mess? And number two, or number four rather, I know this is not part of the responsibility. If you can indulge us, I know some people are responsible for this, but I am not worried that Eskom has been unable to employ a CEO permanently, because that will be a matter of interest to you or for your portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take maybe 2 more hands. Shall we try a first round so that it's not too much? There's a comfort.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Over there, I had was Samgelo, and then I had yourself, my sister. Can I take those? Okay, and then yourself, Samgelo in that order, and then we will come back to listen to the reactions or responses from the panel. Okay. Are you now? Program director. That's fine, go ahead.
My name is Andrew.
Yes, it is.
With the SABC. Minister Ndade Ramaphosa, on the second package of your intervention, you spoke about a possibility of securing or procuring around 1,200 megawatts from Mozambique. There's a standing power purchase agreement between Namibia and Eskom, and that power purchase agreement has to expire, I think, sometime in 2025. Does that power purchase agreement still stand? Looking at the fact that South Africa is struggling to keep the lights on. I know that the president of Namibia is here. The interesting thing is that their people would be having electricity, but South Africans don't have, but they get electricity from South Africa. Is that still stand? And maybe secondly, there's a problem of energy capacity in South Africa. Are you looking at what cost or what causes this problem? Looking at the mushrooming of informal settlements who, one way or the other, need electricity from the national grid. Are you just focusing on coming up with power generation, but you don't look at the generation that is lost because people are either stealing it or people are connecting illegally? What are you doing?
I'm covered. Thank you. Covered. You are covered. Yes.
I'm a shocker.
My name is Tanya Michael. I'm from the Business Day. So the minister mentioned priority stations in the 0 to 6 months plan. Can you just outline those priority stations? And then on the demand side interventions, you mentioned aggressively campaigning against the usage of appliances that take up a lot of electricity, and I'm assuming those are geysers and other things. And the minister said that you would perhaps look into switching those off remotely, but we do know that that could take such a long period of time. I mean, these things cannot be controlled remotely. How is the government planning to do that within the 0 to 6 months? And then the national key points. The issue of it being unable to be switched for technicality there. Can we just expand the technicality? Because when the national state of disaster was enacted, there was provision for that already to exempt those national key points from load shedding. And then with the diesel supply and just financing the burning of diesel for Eskom, you did mention that within the 18.5 tariff increase given to Eskom from NERSA, a portion of that has been given to burn diesel, the OCGTs. But when NERSA gave Eskom the tariff increase, it also gave them a review that running these things is because of a lack of efficiency of the coal-fired plants. And additionally, the 18.5 is only for the 2023-2024 year. So that amount given within that 18.5 is only supposed to last 1 year. So how is government just planning to work around those conditionalities given by NERSA to Eskom?
Thank you, Tondo. Over to you, Chair.
No, thank you very much. I think let me start with the first issue by Mawande. How do we, I think I agree. Now it's perception that because there would be differences and because, and that's why people would assume there's a fight. So at least we get to that point, that it's an assumption that there's a fight. There isn't a fight. And the issue of roles and responsibilities are delegated by the president. From a policy point of view as the ANC, we are saying we want to see end of load shedding. But I understand that the president will be doing some of the proclamation. You know how the government separates the powers in terms of departments and all those. They are done in terms of proclamations. And maybe that could have been the gap that has led to perception of perhaps fights. But what has been happening is that Comrade Skutla has been working with both Comrade Mandashe and Comrade PG Pravin in ensuring that there's synchrony in terms of work, because as much as he's been appointed now, there's still a legal process to be followed to be able to allocate those responsibilities to him. So currently there is a transitional method and process to manage because we can't wait until it's done. That's why he's been given the responsibility to work and do the work that he's doing. And that's why in terms of even the briefing to the NEC, it's him who's leading because he's been appointed to do that work from the point where we are sitting at subcommittee. So at no point there's a difference in understanding between the responsibilities of the comrades. How do we avoid going forward potential conflict is that the separation of the proclamation by the president in terms of allocation of responsibilities for the remainder of this term will be critical. Remember, the resolution from the conference is that we've got to be able to take the departments to the line department. That resolution stands, and the commitment is that it's going to be implemented in the new administration so that there isn't a destabilization of what is happening currently. On the issue of
Mameloko Kubai is saying that there is no attacks currently in the ANC on Sputla Ramakgopa. They're talking about the possibility that there's no difference of understanding in the powers between the different ministers. You would know, of course, that over the past couple of weeks, some reports about, given that there isn't any clarity on the roles and responsibilities of the Minister of Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramakgopa, where does this filter in? The Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, as well as the Minister of Energy, Gwede Mantashe, in this particular aspect. Him talking about concerns about the winter period that is coming up, what plans are being put in place between the immediate to 6 months, as well as 6 to 18 months, talking about the need to run the peaking plants, the availability of diesel, 30 billion rand for diesel made available at this particular point. 8 million geysers in the country, according to him. Efforts to install telemetrics to support a reduction in the use of electricity for those geysers is also something that they're looking at between the 6 and 18 months. They ensuring the procurement of emergency power, as well as looking at how they're going to increase the grid capacity that currently is. But he does say that the winter outlook at the moment is looking quite bad.